You won't believe what happened when I stayed alone with my son for the weekend. What he offered me left me speechless. It started off like any ordinary visit, but turned into something that changed the way I saw everything. His words, his actions, they opened up something I didn't know I needed. Let me know in the comments from which city are you watching this story right now. Now let me tell you what really happened. It had been years since I'd spent more than a few hours alone with Nathan. When he was younger, we had our little routines. Late-night cocoa chats in the kitchen, movie marathons with popcorn that always ended up stuck in the couch cushions, and walks in the park that felt like our private world. But now life had a way of slipping between people. He was grown, busy, independent, and usually somewhere far away. I had my own rhythm too, one shaped by routines, aging, and a home that felt quieter with each passing year. So when he offered to come visit and help me out while I was recovering from a minor surgery, I didn't expect much more than a few cups of tea and him fiddling with my leaky kitchen faucet. But things turned out differently. The first night he arrived, we sat in the living room, just the two of us. The rain tapped lightly on the windows. The air was cool, and I'd wrapped myself in the old wool blanket that still smelled faintly like cedar and lavender. Nathan brought in a tray, 2 steaming mugs, and a plate of chocolate-covered biscuits, just like I used to make when he was 10. You remembered? I smiled. He laughed, a low, warm sound. I remember more than you think, Mom. There was something in his tone. Not sarcastic, not teasing, just knowing. And his eyes held mine for a moment longer than usual. We talked about the house, his job, the news, and then somehow drifted into old stories. He reminded me of the time I accidentally burned a batch of cookies and blamed it on the oven, or how I used to hum softly in the kitchen when I thought no one was listening. I didn't know he remembered those things. I'd looked at him then, really looked at him not just as my son but as a man. He had filled out over the years, his jaw more defined, his shoulders broader. He looked tired though. There were lines beneath his eyes. The kind life leaves behind when you carry too much for too long. And then he sensed something that caught me off guard. You know, I always felt safest when I was near you. Even when things were crazy, even when I didn't know what I was doing with my life, just sitting next to you like this made me feel like everything would be okay. I blinked, unsure what to say. My heart swelled, and at the same time I felt a tug, something deep and heavy. That kind of vulnerability doesn't come easily between parents and grown children. You think you're the one holding them up, but sometimes they're the ones holding you. I reached for his hand. It was warm, strong. His thumb brushed mine gently, just once, and for a moment we didn't speak. We didn't need to. The quiet between us held everything. Why haven't we done this in so long? I asked softly. I guess I didn't know you wanted to, he said. I always want to, I said a little too quickly. His smile faltered just slightly, replaced by something more serious. His voice was quieter now. You don't say that enough. He wasn't accusing. He was just honest. I felt my throat tighten. I didn't want to burden you. You never could. He said. You're not a burden. You're the reason I am who I am. It was then that I realized just how much space had grown between us. Not in distance, but in words left unsaid. I had spent years telling myself he didn't need me anymore. That he had his own life. That my place was in the background, quiet and content. But maybe I'd been wrong. Let's not waste any more time. Okay, I said. Let's talk. Really talk. He nodded. That night, we stayed up late like we hadn't done in decades. We talked about love, about regret, about loneliness, about hope. He told me about the girl he almost married and why it didn't work out. I told him about the nights I cried without knowing exactly why. We weren't mother and son in that moment. Not entirely. We were two people stripped down to the raw truth of ourselves. At one point, I got up to pour more tea. He followed me into the kitchen. As I reached for the cups, he gently took one from my hand. You shouldn't be on your feet too long. It's just tea. I smiled. I know, but still. His hand brushed the small of my back. Not in any strange or inappropriate way, just support, steadying, comforting, but it made me pause because no one had touched me there in a long time. I turned to look at him. You really take care of everyone else, he said, eyes searching mine. But who takes care of you? The question floated in the air like smoke. I didn't answer. I couldn't because I didn't know. Then he did something unexpected. He stepped closer and gently, very gently, wrapped his arms around me. Not a quick hug, not a polite squeeze. It was an embrace, full, present. A moment wrapped in warmth and something I couldn't quite name. I felt myself sink into him. My head rested against his chest and I could hear the rhythm of his heart. Strong, steady, reassuring. "You don't have to be so strong all the time," he whispered. I closed my eyes. He was right. I didn't. And for the first time in a long while I let go. The next morning the house was quiet in that strange soft way. It is after a night filled with too much feeling. Light filtered in through the curtains, golden and warm, dancing across the hardwood floor. I stayed in bed longer than usual, listening to the distant clatter of dishes and the faint scent of coffee drifting down the hall. Nathan was already up. For a moment I let myself lay there, wrapped in the silence. My hand still tingled from where he had held it the night before. That hug, that moment had left a mark deeper than I could explain. It wasn't romantic, no, but it was intimate in a way that unnerved me yet comforted me at the same time. I got up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles from my robe and brushing my fingers through my hair. When I walked into the kitchen, he was leaning against the counter, shirt slightly wrinkled, barefoot, sipping coffee from the mug I always used, the one with the chipped rim and the faded floral pattern. He smiled when he saw me. "Morning," he said. "Smells good in here. I made scrambled eggs. Thought I'd surprise you." He lifted the pan a little. "Used the rosemary ukro by the window." I laughed softly. "You actually remember that?" "I remember everything more than you think." We ate breakfast at the little table by the window. The kind of breakfast where the words are light, but the air still feels heavy with unspoken thoughts. I kept catching myself watching him. The way his brow furrowed when he read the paper, the curve of his jaw as he sipped his coffee, the calm steadiness of his presence. And I kept wondering how I'd missed this version of him. When he left home, he'd been bright and full of ambition, but still so young. And now he was here, a man shaped by life, pain, and growth. I realized sitting across from him that I barely knew who he'd become. And maybe I thought he didn't really know me anymore either. We spent most of the day cleaning out the garage, something I'd been avoiding for years. It was his idea. He said it would be good for me to let go of some old ghosts. He wasn't wrong. As we sifted through boxes of photographs, high school yearbooks, and forgotten trinkets, we laughed at old memories and uncovered a few surprises. He found a picture of me from before he was born. I was in my 20s, barefoot, leaning against a sunlit porch railing, hair wild, eyes bright. He stared at it for a long time before handing it to me. "You were beautiful," he said. "Still are." I blushed. Actually blushed. "Flatterer. I'm serious," he said quietly. "You've always carried this light in you. I don't think you even know how much you gave to me just by being you." I couldn't meet his eyes then. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I did. And hearing it from him cracked something open in me I hadn't let breathe in a long, long time. That evening the weather turned. Rain swept across the street in waves, thunder rumbling low in the distance. We lit a fire in the living room and curled up with old movies, the kind we used to watch when he was a kid. There was something achingly nostalgic about it, something sacred. Halfway through the movie he shifted on the couch and looked at me, his tone more serious this time. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever feel lonely?" I hesitated. Yes, I admitted more than I let on. He nodded slowly as if he'd expected the answer. "I do too," he said. "I thought maybe that would change as I got older, but it doesn't. Not really. Just shows up in different ways." I turned toward him, his face illuminated by the flickering light from the fireplace. "I know," I whispered. "It's like a quiet ache. Always there, even in the good moments." We were quiet for a while. Then carefully he reached out and took my hand again, the way he had the night before. "Do you think it's okay," he said softly, "to lean on each other? Even now, even like this?" I felt my breath catch. "Yes," I whispered. "I think it's more than okay." He gave the smallest nod as if something inside him finally settled. That night we didn't go to our separate rooms. Not right away. Instead, we sat by the fire, wrapped in one blanket, his head resting gently against mine. The closeness was tender, not forbidden or strange, just honest. Just two people who needed warmth, comfort, and to feel seen. He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, something he hadn't done since he was little. I looked into his eyes, and for a brief moment I wasn't his mother. I was just Emily, a woman, alone, open, vulnerable, and he was just Nathan, a man searching. offering something that felt more like healing than anything else. "You don't have to be alone in all of this," he said quietly. And for the first time in years, I believed it. The storm outside had passed, but inside the house the hush remained. It wasn't awkward silence. No, it was something softer, like a warm blanket after a cold wind. That morning I woke up in my bed, but I knew I hadn't gotten there alone. Nathan had walked me down the hall, steadying me by the elbow as I limped from the lingering soreness in my leg. He tucked me in gently, brushing his palm against my forehead, the way I used to when he had fevers as a child. But this wasn't childhood, and I wasn't his caretaker anymore. Something between us had shifted, subtle but undeniable. I rose slowly, touched by the echo of his presence from the night before. When I made my way into the kitchen, it was already there again, like he had been waiting. He looked up and smiled, that same quiet smile that had taken root in his expression over the last few days. A mixture of familiarity and something deeper, protective, almost reverent. "I made that lemon tea you like," he said. "Figured you might need it this morning. Have you been up long?" He shrugged. "Long enough to miss hearing you snore." I gave him a look. "I do not snore." "Oh, you do? But it's kind of comforting." He handed me the tea and our fingers touched. His were warm, mine cool from the hallway. "Thanks," I said, barely a buckle whisper. We sat outside on the small covered porch, bundled in sweaters and holding our mugs with both hands. The air smelled like damp leaves and clean earth. A few birds chirped from the trees, their sounds scattered but sweet. The world felt still, like it was giving us room to breathe. He looked out over the yard. "I keep thinking about how fast time's moved. Like I blinked and we both got older." I nodded, sipping. "I feel that every time I pass a mirror." He glanced at me, his tone quiet but clear. "You're still beautiful." I felt my chest tighten. I should have brushed it off. Should have laughed and waved him away with a mother's humility. But I didn't. "Not this time." "Thank you," I said. He shifted slightly in his seat, turned his body more toward me. "I know I missed a lot these last few years, holidays, birthdays. I don't even know when I became the kind of son who calls once every few weeks. I figured you had your own life to live." I said I did, but that doesn't mean I should have left you alone so much. The words struck me deep. I hadn't realized until that moment how much I'd needed to hear them. How long I'd been holding that quiet ache, convincing myself it didn't matter. I got used to it. I admitted, "You learn to stop expecting certain things when they don't come." "I'm sorry, Mom." The way he said it, not just as a son apologizing for missed time, but as a man confronting his own distance, broke something open in me. I reached out without thinking and touched his knee. A simple gesture, but he didn't pull away. He looked at my hand, then placed his over it. "I want to do better," he said. "Be closer. Not just visit out of obligation, but because I want to, because I miss you, not just the idea of you." "You." I didn't speak. I just let the truth of it settle in. Then gently he turned my hand over in his and traced his fingers along the lines of my palm. "You used to do this to me when I was little," he said. "You said every line told a story." I smiled. "And you always asked me to make up the endings." He looked up. "Maybe now it's your turn to have a new one." I wasn't sure what he meant at first. But then he added, "You don't have to keep living in the shell of what was. You still have so much to give, Mom. You still are so much." I blinked back the sting of tears. It was strange how someone could know you your whole life, yet still say something that made you feel entirely new. We sat in silence for a while longer. At some point, I rested my head on his shoulder. He didn't move. If anything, he leaned into me. That night, we cooked dinner together. Pasta, salad, and garlic bread, just like old times. We danced to old Motown records in the kitchen, laughing as the timer beeped and the bread almost burned. For a moment, it felt like I was 20 again, with the world ahead of me and someone by my side. After dinner, I went to the bathroom to wash my face. When I looked into the mirror, I paused. My reflection didn't look younger. It still held the years and the softness of time, but my eyes, they were awake, alert, like something inside me had stirred. When I stepped into the hallway, Nathan was standing outside my bedroom door, waiting. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." He walked closer and touched my arm. His fingers lingered. "You can tell me anything," he said. "You always could." I swallowed. "I know. It's just sometimes things are hard to put into words. Then don't, he said, just be here with me. We stood like that for a long moment, not speaking, not moving. Just two souls caught in a space between memory and possibility. Eventually, he leaned in and kissed my forehead. Good night, Mom. But as he pulled back, his eyes stayed on mine. Something unspoken passed between us. A spark of recognition, of care, of something deeper, still wrapped in safety and love, but edged with vulnerability. Good night, Nathan, I said. He nodded slowly, turned and walked toward the guest room. I stood in the hallway long after his door clicked shut, and in the quiet of that moment, I realized something that would change everything. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was restless or uncomfortable, but because something inside me had shifted. A quiet current that had started days ago was now rushing through me like a river finally given permission to flow. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling every beat of my heart echo with things I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Nathan was just down the hall. The thought should have brought me comfort like it always had when he was a boy, and I knew he was safe under my roof. But this time it was different. There was something in his presence now, a maturity, a steadiness, and a way he looked at me that was no longer just a son looking at his mother. It wasn't inappropriate. It wasn't forbidden, but it was complicated. At some point I got up. My bare feet patted softly against the floor as I walked quietly down the hallway. I wasn't sure why I was going to his room. Maybe just to peek in like I'd used to do when he was small to make sure he was sleeping soundly. Maybe I just needed to see him one more time before the night faded into morning. But as I stood in front of the door, my hand hovered over the knob and I hesitated. Then I heard his voice low and calm. You can come in, Mom. The door creaked open, and there he was, sitting up in bed, the dim glow of the lamp casting soft shadows across his face. He looked so calm, so certain, like he'd known I would come. I couldn't sleep, I said, stepping in. I know, me neither. He pulled the blanket aside just a little. A silent invitation. I stood there for a moment, torn between habit and instinct. Then I stepped forward and sat on the edge of the bed. His hand found mine warm and sure, and I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I've been thinking, he said quietly, about how much we carry. About the things we never say, the things we buried to protect each other. I know, I whispered. I've buried a lot. I see that now, he said. And I hate that you thought you had to do it alone. I turned to look at him. His eyes were so open, so kind. There wasn't judgment in them, just care. Just that deep, unwavering presence that had shown up every day he'd been here. You made me feel seen again, I said. You reminded me I'm still a woman, not just a mother, not just someone people pass by. You've always been more than that, he said. I looked down at our hands. His thumb gently moved across mine. That simple motion, tender and slow, told me everything he couldn't say with words. Nathan, you don't have to explain it, he said softly. Whatever this is, whatever it means, it's safe here. You're safe. And for the first time in a very long time, I let myself believe it. I leaned into him, resting my head against his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around me, holding me close. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that's full of emotion, full of honesty. We stay like that for a long time. No pressure, no fear, just warmth and understanding. It wasn't about crossing lines. It wasn't about confusion. It was about recognizing each other in our most human, vulnerable state. Two people, each carrying their own loneliness, finding in each other a place to rest. Eventually, he laid back and I stayed curled beside him, fully clothed, fully present, my head on his chest, his heartbeat under my ear. I felt safe. And something about that moment made me realize how much I'd been needing to feel safe. Not in a room, not in a house, but in a connection. We talked until sleep found us, about the years we'd missed, about things we never admitted out loud. He told me about the nights he sat alone in hotel rooms, wondering if he'd ever find someone who truly understood him. I told him about the mornings I stood in the mirror, wondering if I still mattered to anyone. You matter to me, he said. He held my hand as I drifted off, and when I woke up hours later, the sunlight just beginning to sneak through the blinds, I was still in his arms. We didn't talk much that morning. There was no need. Something had shifted and we both felt it. We made breakfast together, quiet, unhurried, and laughed about the eggs sticking to the pan again. The kind of laugh that only comes when you've walked through something deep and come out softer. When it came time for him to leave, He hugged me at the door, long and close, his cheek pressed to mine. "I'll be back soon," he said. "You better be." He stepped outside, but before he got to the car, he turned. "You're not alone anymore." "Okay." I nodded. "I know." As he drove away, I stood there in the doorway, holding my mug, feeling the warmth of his presence, still clinging to me like the morning sun. And I knew then this wasn't just a visit. It was a beginning, a rediscovery, a promise, not of anything rushed or labeled, but of something even more rare. A deep emotional connection that reminded me I was still alive, still needed, still loved. And in that quiet morning light, I smiled because for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt whole.